Now, I thought we could go on and talk really about this Silk Road as a concept. And, if I look at this area of Central Asia, much of it's desert, right, with these green spots around along the way. And if I turn then to this map, there are a lot of roads there. And yet, if I had lived, let's say, in the 8th century, or even in the 17th century, 18th century, I would not have spoken in terms of the Silk Road or Silk Roads or anything like that. How did it come about that this Silk Road has become such a concept in our popular imagination? In China, too.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that one basic thing is that we tend to impose on earlier history that which is familiar to us. So we are used to roads and highways and fixed channels of communication. In those earlier times, if we talk about roads, we put it in quotation marks because these were very often the paths that people walked or animals trod along, which were beaten into the soil perhaps. They didn't necessarily all go in the same direction. There were many alternative routes that even now we're not quite sure where some of them went, but people traveled. And so the idea of the Silk Roads was really an invention, as it turns out, of the late 19th century.
This German von Richthofen, you once told me, had been instrumental in doing this out of his interest in geography. So von Richthofen is, in some sense, relying on written sources.
Yes.
Right? What effect does that have on sort of the exploratory mind of the 19th and early 20th century?
Well, what you find is that increasingly there was European exploration of areas of Central Asia. And some of it is by Russians, some of it is by a Swede, Sven Hedin. Some of it is coming from people who come up into Central Asia from India. The most famous of these explorers was a Hungarian-born Brit named Aurel Stein, Mark Aurel Stein. And his explorations along the so-called Silk Roads are really what laid the basis for the modern study of them, because he visited an amazing number of sites. He did serious excavation. He documented it very, very carefully, and he brought back a lot of the artifacts.
And here we have a picture of you with a statue of Sir Aurel Stein.
Yes.
Good. If we look at this, it's a web of populated places, I think you're saying, along which goods traveled. When we say goods traveled, we've talked about silk, obviously, as one of them. And if we look at this image you wanted us to look at in conjunction with this map, what are the important kinds of goods that you see traveling along through here? And perhaps you could explain to people what they're seeing.
Yeah, a painted banner. The fabric is silk. It was painted probably in the 10th century. It is a Buddhist bodhisattva, and the banner was found in the Mogao Caves at Dunhuang. The bodhisattva is holding a glass bowl, which you can see is transparent. You can actually see the hand of the bodhisattva. The bowl has facets on it, which were cut into the glass. As far as we know, this bowl came from the Middle East, from the Persian Sasanian Empire.
So it traveled something like 1,000 miles, 1,500 miles or so to get there.
Yeah.
And so that's one indication. Glass, I've always been taught, is very fragile. So
Yes.
somehow they're transporting this.
Yes.
Must be an extremely valuable piece.
Well, yes, and when we talk about what traveled the Silk Roads, of course, in one way we need to talk about very valuable transportable objects. So when we find them in places like the Mogao Caves or depictions or in tombs, what we're finding is the particularly precious things which were preserved to be buried as part of the memorial complex. And of course, the more ordinary things aren't always preserved.
You also told me that ceramics were coming along.
One of the very challenging aspects of the study of the Silk Roads is, were they just overland routes? Or were they a combination of overland and maritime routes? And if we really want to write the history of what we call the Silk Roads, we have to include the maritime routes. And very often it was the ships that left southeastern China and ended up, some of them, in the Persian Gulf, which took the ceramic.
So we have goods that are traveling, silk, in this case, presumably metals as well?
Metal objects. In some cases, the metal objects were then imitated by the ceramicists in terms of their shape or the designs on them. And then, of course, there are the things that have not been preserved as physical objects, ideas.
technologies, ways of doing things.
Religions.
Religions. You know, it struck me, given our conversations, that talking about styles and patterns and motifs and decorations and images is a really important way of thinking about this extraordinary diversity of cultures. All these objects stretching over from all the way from Constantinople in the west to Chang'an in the east and Hangzhou and Guangzhou, Canton in the south. Even actually going to Japan, you've pointed out, in Korea. If I look at all of these things and we think in terms of art, we would expect to see some similarities or some connections between things.